Welcome to part 3 of Anna Karenina. What a splendid day, sitting outside with my book. This is the Rosamund Bartlett translation. I suppose if you're following along you'll already know that, because why would you jump into a part 3 video if you hadn't watched any of the others? So part 3 chapter 1, we've got Konstantin Levin with his half-brother Sergei Ivanovich. And it's a short chapter, there's not much happens in it, but it does go into a discussion of how Levin reacts to the peasantry, or how he thinks of the peasants. And it says here, he loved and did not love the peasantry, as he loved and did not love people in general. And that struck me as being a wee bit Dostoevskian. I'm reading Brothers Karamazov at the moment as well, which you might also be following along the vlogs for. And there was a scene in that got me thinking about this kind of thing, where the Stariettes, Elder Zosima, was talking of he was telling a story about a doctor who'd said to him that the more he loves humanity, the less he loves individual men. And I found that quite profound. I put up a post about it on my Substack and got some good responses on it, actually. So this is Levin, and it talks not only of loving the peasantry or not loving them, but also of knowing them and not knowing them, as he knows and doesn't know individuals or himself. So he's a bit of a thinker, but he's also a practical man. And he's out there trying to run his farm, and his half-brother Sergei Ivanovich is not an outdoor lover. He's a city dweller, and he comes to visit, and Konstantin Levin feels obliged to entertain him, which causes him some angst, because he feels that he should be out managing his peasants and getting the farm work done and stuff. So yeah, he's an outdoor country guy, and I just love sitting out here in the springtime reading about Levin on the farm and his estate. But yeah, he wants to be out there getting stuff done, whereas his brother wants to be lying in the grass. And it says, this is what he was doing, lying in the grass. There's not a single thought in my head. You could roll a ball in it. I thought that was quite a neat turn of phrase. I need to look that up in the other translations and see what they've done with that, and read the Russian bit as well. So yeah, that's part 3 chapter 1. So see you soon. Part 3 chapter 2, we've got Konstantin Levin and his brother Sergei Ivanovich at Konstantin's estate, and they're talking about the zemstvo. So Agafya, what was her name? Agafya Mikhailovna. She fell taking a jar of mushrooms down the stairs to the basement and sprained her wrist, so they got the doctor in, the zemstvo doctor. And we get into a bit of politics. But before that, we get descriptions of nature, the farm. So we're reaching that lull between sowing and reaping. And we get a description of the beauty of the farm. And then we get this little quotation which fascinates me. Konstantin Levin did not like talking and hearing about the beauty of nature. Words for him removed the beauty of what he was seeing. So let's unpack that a bit. I had a message from a Russian woman who reads my Substack today, responding to a post I put up last week about Levin, and she said that Levin is based on Tolstoy himself. In fact, if you take Levin's name, Lev, that's also Tolstoy's first name. Leo in English, Lev in Russian. So Levin is based on Tolstoy. And what's Tolstoy saying here, if this is him? Because Tolstoy's descriptions of nature which you'll know if you've been reading along with me, are exquisite, beautiful in their own right. But he's saying that describing nature in words detracts from the beauty of nature. I don't know. Is he putting himself down and even attempting to describe nature in words, knowing in his heart that he'll never do it justice? But himself, he's created something beautiful in his words, which is not nature. It's a different thing, the beauty of the words. Describing the nature becomes itself a thing of beauty. Not making sense. So I find that a fascinating thing to think about. And there was another bit here I really liked about taking the horse and cart into the meadow, and it says the tall grass wrapped itself softly round the wheels and the horse's legs, leaving its seeds on the wet spokes and hubs. See? Beauty. In chapter 3, we get into the political discussion about the zemstvo. So Sergei Ivanovich, Levin's half-brother, is berating Levin for not taking part in the zemstvo. So what is a zemstvo? It's like a local council, town/village council. And they have a budget. It looks like they tax landowners based on the size of their land per hectare or per whatever the measurement would have been in those days. And they use that money for education, for hospitals, for doctors, for judiciary. And Sergei Ivanovich feels that Constantine should be taking part in the running of it. And he's not into it at all. He says, no, why should I get involved in things that don't concern me directly? So there's a bit here at the end where Constantine bursts out and says, I think that no activity can be sound if it is not based on self-interest. It's a general philosophical truth. Is it though? So he says he's quite happy to get involved with what he talked about when he was a student, and the authorities came down on them for certain letters they were writing or something. So that affected him directly, and he said he would defend his right to the hilt against things which affect him directly, but in this instance the things don't concern him directly. So he's like, says I just can't. So there's a philosophical idea here that he doesn't believe in local government as being useful, which is an interesting thing to think about. And his brother, on the other hand, is very politically aware. Does that mean Levin's not? Levin's all about nature and countryside. He's not about politics. But he's in a privileged position. It's all right for him to think that way, because he has everything he needs. He's a landowner, etc. But he did get involved in the emancipation of the serfs, because I suppose that would have affected him directly. Being a landowner, he would have had serfs. So, yeah, it's an interesting chapter. Got the phone on my knee, so it's going to sugar a wee bit. I've just read 3 chapters, part 3, chapters 4, 5 and 6, with Constantine Levin out in the meadow. One man went to mow, along with 42 peasants. He went to mow a meadow. So yeah, spectacular, beautiful, amazing scenes as I sit here in my garden, enjoying the bird song. And having spent some time yesterday doing manual chores, painting fences, which took hours and became like a flow state exercise, and that's exactly what it talks about here. and Levin going into a flow state. So at first he's a bit apprehensive about how he's going to be regarded by the peasants because he's the gentry, but that soon goes out of his head. He's also worried that they're going to judge his poor mowing skills, which they're a bit rusty at the beginning, but once he gets into the swing of it, the way Tolstoy has described that flow state and how it feels like the scythe is actually just working on its own. Yeah, it's beautiful. And when he's done, he goes back home and talks to his brother, and he says to his brother, you can't even imagine what a brilliant day I've had out mowing and eating with the peasants and talking with them and getting to know them and being part of that work. He says, I think we should prescribe Arbeitskur, which apparently means work cure, for anyone who's dealing with any kind of health issues, particularly mental health. And I was like, yeah, you know, this is what gets talked about now. I suppose it's been what's talked about forever. It's not a new idea. You know, meaning and purpose can come from a hard day's graft, doing something worthwhile, particularly on your own land. I mean, painting my own fences is good. I don't imagine I would enjoy painting someone else's, even if they were paying me. I suppose that's what the peasants have to do though, isn't it? Work cure. Yeah, I suppose there's satisfaction in a day's work well done, whether it's for oneself or whether it's for money, because then you can use that money for oneself to better one's circumstances, or to feed the family, or to pay rent, or fix the roof, or whatever it might be. But yeah, it's just the way this is set up, timing-wise, to be reading about springtime in the springtime, because that's how this would have been published, following Henry Eliot's Substack, where we read it as it was published in the Russian Messenger journal. So these scenes would have come out now in the spring going into summer. It's just lovely. So it says, Levin had used his own method of calming down. He took a scythe from a peasant and started mowing. And then I did highlight a bit about the flow state. They did row after row. They did long rows and short rows, and rows with good and bad grass. Levin lost all awareness of time and had absolutely no idea whether it was late or early. A change had begun to take place in his work now, which brought him immense pleasure. There were moments in the middle of his work when he forgot what he was doing and it became easy. And in those moments his row came out almost as evenly and as well as Titus's. But as soon as he remembered what he was doing and began trying to do it better, he immediately felt the full difficulty of the work and his row came out badly. So yeah, I just love that description of the flow state. You know, when time disappears and the work gets done effortlessly. Love it. Right, we're at part 3, chapter 7. And we're with Dolly, Daria Alexandrovna, Steva's wife. So she's just gone off to the dacha at Ergusheva, which seemingly is not in good shape. She's gone there to save money. She's taken the 6 children. And when she gets there, she discovers that a lot of work needs to be done to the place. The nursery floods in a downpour. The cows aren't a-milking. The bull is charging them. The fences need repaired. The horse is pulling. There's all kinds of stuff needs done. So she despairs. But then, through the offices of Matriona Filimovna, she calms the mistress down and says that everything will shape up. A word which is in italics. It says that's the word that she used. And so I looked it up in the other translations I have. This is Rosamund Bartlett, remember. Pevear and Volokhonsky also use shape up. And Constance Garnett uses everything would come round. So the Russian verb is obrazuyется. Всё образуется. Everything will work out. So, wee linguistic point of interest there. But then things do work out because, what was her name again? Matriona Filamonovna. She does start to get things in order. She hires in somebody to cook, they get the roof repaired, the fences repaired, and it all starts to work out. And then we get this beautiful quotation. So she's talking about concerns and worries. And she says that they were the only, this is the narrator, they were the only possible happiness for Darya Alexandrovna. Without them, she would have been left alone to brood about her husband who did not love her. So she's getting into busy work, so she doesn't have to think about that. But then we get this summation of life. These joys were so small that they were as unnoticeable as specks of golden sand. And during the bad moments, she could see only the pain and only the sand. But there were also good moments when she could see only the joy and only the gold. Nice, isn't it? So she's talking about her children here and, you know, how one child's sick and then another one needs help with something, and there's never any peace and tranquility when you've got 6 kids. I have a friend with 6 kids, I'm sure he can relate. Hi Kelly. So she's starting to become more aware of those joys now in the solitude of the country. Often as she looked at them, she would make every possible effort to persuade herself that she was mistaken, that she was partial to her children since she was their mother. Nevertheless, she could not help telling herself that she had delightful children, all 6 of them, each in their own way, each one of a kind, and she was happy with them and proud of them. Go on your cell, Dolly. Go on your cell. Part 3, Chapter 8. Dolly takes the kids to communion, and then they go bathing in the river. It's a nice scene. They're getting to grips with the countryside. And the peasant women come along and they chat at the river bank, so yeah, lovely. Grisha gets no tart as a punishment for whistling. Imagine that, eh, Willow? I remember that from when I lived over in Ukraine. It was nilzya to whistle in the house. You're not allowed to do that. Superstitions and all that. So I guess that goes back to that. But Tanya takes Grisha some tart because she feels sorry for him, and Dolly's touched by that sisterly love. And chapter 9, Levin calls on Dolly and tells her that she's like a mother hen. Levin is tactful, and Dolly understands that about him, as do the kids. So there's a wee quotation here about hypocrisy. It says that hypocrisy, in whatever guise, can deceive the cleverest and most perceptive person, but the dullest of children will recognise it, however artfully it may be concealed, and be repelled. So they're saying that Levin doesn't have a hypocritical bone in his body. He offers to help out Darya Alexandrovna by instructing her how to feed her cows. He even offers her 2 cows of his own on loan, but she refuses and apparently embarrasses himself in front of Miss Hooley with his poor English. And of course that makes me chuckle because of Balamori. I think it's probably Miss Hoole, Hoole, in the Bartlett translation. But of course, Miss Hooley was the school teacher in the kids' TV show Balamory, which I watched with my kids when they were growing up. What's the story in Balamory, wouldn't you like to know? So there you go, that's that chapter. It's a nice scene. It finishes by Dolly telling Lievin that Kitty's coming. And of course, all of a sudden he's like, oh, and he feels that his serenity is going to be upset, which I dare say it will be, because he kind of got over the fact that she rejected him. So yeah, this is going to be interesting. The more I read about Lievin, the more I come to love him as one of my favourite characters in literature. He's just such a down-to-earth and honest guy. And those scenes with him on his farm, some of my favourite scenes in literature. Part 3, Chapter 10. We've got continuation of the conversation between Lievin and Dolly. Apparently Dolly didn't know that Lievin had proposed to Kitty, though she admitted to having guessed as much. Then she goes on to explain the differences between men and women when it comes to marriage proposals, and Lievin isn't wearing it. So she's saying that for men, they get to spend time with the women that they are considering proposing to in order to get to know them and see if feelings will blossom. Whereas for women, it's just a question of answering yes or no. Lievin's like, no, I'm not having that, and he's getting quite upset that she's bringing it up again, because this thing with Kitty that he thought he'd laid to rest has now been brought back into his mind again, which makes him feel uncomfortable. And he says, Daria Alexandrovna, that's how people choose clothes or whatever else they want to buy, but not love. The choice has been made, and so much the better. It can't be repeated. And then they agree to leave it alone. At which point one of Dolly's kids comes in and asks for a spade in Russian. Dolly speaks to her kids in French. And Lievin's like, he disapproves. And it says here, why does she have to talk French with the children, he thought. How unnatural and false. And the children feel that. Learning French and unlearning sincerity, he thought to himself, unaware that Daria Alexandrovna had already turned this over in her mind 20 times and still believed it necessary to teach her children French that way, even if it was at the cost of sincerity. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? She can't move away from this societal obligation that she feels to teach her kids French. Interesting. Comes up in War and Peace as well, the French thing. In fact, there's a whole load of French in that novel, which starts to dwindle away as Napoleon gets into Russia, and French becomes no longer the thing to speak for obvious reasons. So yeah, Lievin's upset about this Kitty thing, he's upset about the French thing, and he says, I'm not going to come and call on you when Kitty's here. I'm not going to put myself through that. And then he goes on to think how he will never be like that with his own kids, speaking French with them, because that's just silly. So that's where we leave that one. Part 3, Chapter 11. Short chapter. Lievin heads to Pokrovskoye, which is sister's farm, 15 miles away from where he lives, in the middle of July, because the peasants are swindling her with the hay making, not declaring the right amounts or under counting or something. So he goes to help out with that, and it seems he's right. The peasants have been misdeclaring the amount of hay that they've gathered to make more for themselves. So Levin the businessman. I admire that about him. And that's really it. Apart from this beautiful scene where we get a tale of young love, and we've got Ivan Parmenov and his wife who are loading a haystack together, and we just get a lovely description of the two of them working together to toss the hay bales up onto the cart, and it's typically Tolstoyan delightful writing. Clearly trying to save her every minute of unnecessary labour, Ivan quickly caught each load in his outstretched arms and smoothed it out into the cart. After passing up what was left of the hay with the rake, the young wife shook off the wisps that had fallen onto her neck, and straightening the red kerchief that had slipped onto her white, untanned forehead, she crawled under the cart to fasten the load. It's just a lovely scene. Right, book 3, chapter 12. This is the last chapter in the publication order that we're following with Henry Eliot. This is where the third instalment would have stopped, as published in the Russian Messenger back in the day. And I can see why, because it ends with a change that's about to occur. But we'll get to that in a minute. So, we left Levin with the peasants, and here's Willow coming. As soon as I hit record, it's guaranteed she's going to come and pester me. So yeah, Levin was talking to, the narrator was talking about a couple, young married couple who were working together to bring in the harvest, and we continue with their leaving the scene on the back of a horse cart with hay, and then the peasants burst into song, and it's a beautiful scene, isn't it, Willow? 25 or so peasant women bursting into the refrain, and it gives Levin a feeling of envy. It says Levin started to feel envious of this healthy merriment, and he wanted to take part in expressing this joy of being alive. When the peasants and their song disappeared, both from his sight and his hearing, Levin was overcome by a feeling of deep melancholy on account of his loneliness, his physical indolence, and his resentment of this world. So it's stirring up feelings in him. And then we read about 3 changes that he goes through. And it says that first of all was the renunciation of his old life. Sorry about that, Willow. So yeah, he's looking at renouncing his old life, and this gave him pleasure, and he found it easy and straightforward. Other thoughts and ideas concerned the life he wished to live now. He had a clear sense of the simplicity, the purity, and the validity of this life, and he was convinced he would find in it the fulfilment, the peace of mind, and the dignity he so painfully lacked. But a third series of thoughts revolved around the question of how to make the transition from the old to the new life. Should I have a wife? Should I have a job and the necessity of work? Should I leave Pokrovskoye, buy land, join a peasant commune, marry a peasant girl? How am I to go about it? One thing is certain, this night has decided my fate. All this is much simpler and better. So that's what's going through his mind, and we're given another Tolstoyan glimpse of the sky, which you'll be familiar with if you've read War and Peace. Tolstoy loves the sky. So Levin's looking at the clouds and thinking how lovely everything has been on this lovely night. But then a carriage comes past. Can you guess who's in the carriage? It's Kitty, of course. He realised that she was driving to Ergusheva from the railway station. Everything that had disturbed Levin during that sleepless night and all the decisions he had taken suddenly vanished. He recalled his dreams of marrying a peasant girl with disgust. It was only there in that rapidly receding carriage which had crossed over to the other side of the road, that there was a possibility of solving the riddle of his life, which had been preying on him so heavily of late. So it's Kitty. Of course it's Kitty. This section finishes with him saying, "No, however good that simple working life is, I cannot go back to it. I love her." So that's the end of chapter 12. It's not the end of part 3 though, so I'm going to crack on to get to the end of part 3 before I publish this. So we've still got quite a bit to go. Yeah, there is quite a lot actually. So that's what, chapter 13, it goes up to chapter 32. So yeah, we're not even halfway. So stick around. Part 3, chapter 13. We get into the head of Alexei Alexandrovich Karenin, and I'm troubled by what a despicable man he really is. We go through all of his thought processes about how to deal with what just happened when Anna confessed her adultery. And it starts off by saying that Alexei Alexandrovich can't be doing with women's tears. We get a description of how whenever a woman is coming to petition him in his place of work, one of his assistants will warn the petitioner not to burst into tears, because if they do, Karenin will basically kick them out of the office and reject their petition. What a horrible man. We then were told that having this confession being aired for him feels like having a rotten tooth extracted. Now all his feelings of suspicion and jealousy have been confirmed. It's as if he's been liberated. That's the word it uses, liberated. And he considers what his course of action is going to be. He thinks about a duel, offering Vronsky out for a duel, and decides no. He's too cowardly for that. So he's not like Pevear. Remember Pevear in War and Peace? When he calls out Dolokhov for a duel in a moment of passion. And Dolokhov is apparently having it off with the beautiful Hélène, Pevear's wife. But no, Karenin's not that type of character. He's scared of a duel, besides which he's convinced he'll be the one who ends up being wounded or killed. He's the innocent party. That wouldn't be fair. So, what about divorce? No, divorce wouldn't do, because that would reflect badly on him and it would affect his reputation. So he's not willing to do that. And for similar reasons, separation isn't on the cards. He says, "My aim is to safeguard my reputation so that I can carry on with my work without interruption." That's his aim. Then goes on to talk about his desire for revenge. He doesn't want Anna to be happy, and he'll do what he can in order to prevent that, so she can't in any way remain in a relationship with Vronsky. So he decides that his only course of action is to maintain the status quo, to keep Anna with him and not allow her to continue in her affair. And that will, it says, deep in his soul he wanted her to suffer for having destroyed his equilibrium and his honour. And then at the end of the chapter it talks of how this decision is in keeping with religion. He keeps his wife with her, there's no divorce, and it says, "Yes, time will pass, that great healer time, and our old relations will be restored. Restored, that is, to the extent that I won't feel the course of my life is disrupted. She is bound to be unhappy, but I am not guilty of anything, so I cannot be unhappy. So that's, 6 pages of Karenina's thought processes, and at no point is the word love mentioned. Does he love his wife? I don't think so. All he cares about is reputation, damage limitation, making sure he comes off okay, and that Anna suffer for her crime. Now, having never been through an affair or a divorce or anything like that, thankfully I have no personal experience that I can bring to bear here. I can imagine possibly the idea that one would want one's partner to suffer, but it's not, to my mind, in keeping with religion, the idea of forgiveness, turning the other cheek. And if one loves someone, then one wishes that person to be happy. But, you know, jealousy, envy, resentment, those are real emotions. So I just find it fascinating that through all of those pages we don't get a single mention of the word love. And that's what I think Anna has been craving, and that's why she's turned away to someone else. Chapter 14, and we're spending some time with Alexei Alexandrovich, which, you know, isn't a fun guy to hang with. So he writes a letter to Anna stating his thoughts and giving her instructions. And it says he writes to her in French using the formal vous, which Tolstoy tells us does not have the same cold character it does in Russian. Really? I didn't know that. That's quite interesting. So basically we get a description of, well, first of all we get the letter that he writes to her. It's very cold, it's very unloving, and he tells her to come home because dacha season is coming to an end. He sends her some money, which she seems quite pleased to have remembered to do, and says to her that we're going to carry on as normal and you'll give up your relationship with Vronsky. Then we get a discussion of his work, and I'm not quite sure what that's all about. What's it supposed to illustrate to us? We get a discussion of a case, a legal case that's been going on for generation after generation, which, having just finished Bleak House by Charles Dickens, has me thinking of Jarndyce and Jarndyce. I wonder if Tolstoy read Bleak House. So that's really it. We get a description of his work and how he seems to lose himself in his work. But there's a scene here where it says that he looks at a portrait of Anna, and it says, after looking at the portrait for a minute, such a shudder ran through Alexei Alexandrovich that his lips quivered and uttered the sound brrr, and he turned away. And that got me thinking that Alexei Alexandrovich thinks that he has the power in the relationship, but he doesn't. And I've just finished reading A Handmaid's Tale, and I'm watching the TV show, and it feels a bit like Offred and Commander Waterford. And the commander thinks he has the power in the relationship, and with his wife as well. So there's that parallel. But it's really about the relationship with him and Offred, and he doesn't have the power, Offred has the power. That's what it made me think of, because that's what's topical right now for me. And then later on, there's another scene where Alexei gets up and walks around the room, and it says that he glanced again at the portrait, frowned, and smiled contemptuously. So, he's a loveless man with no power, but thinks he has the power. Interesting. Part 3, chapter 15. Anna's feeling shame, but takes solace in her son and her role as a mother. So, yes, she's feeling so much shame that she's been bursting into tears. She regrets having spoken to her husband, but it's done. She can't take it back. Says she writes a letter to her husband to say that she's taking her son, she doesn't say their son, to Moscow, and pleads with him to allow it. She also writes a letter to Vronsky but tears it up. So, yeah, she's decided to leave, basically. So this is before she discovers what her husband has decided. Remember we spoke about that. So, yeah, it's an interesting chapter. She's upset, regrets her decision, and decides... Is this the one where she goes off to Betsy's, or is that the next one? Let's get into the next one. So we're into chapter 16 here. She gets a letter from her husband. Uh-oh. You know, the one where he spells out what's going to happen. That basically things are going to carry on as they have been. A loveless marriage. He needs to save face and minimise the damage limitation. And he's thinking really only of himself. Not even his son, actually. Just himself. So it says, that morning she had regretted what she had said to her husband and wished only that those words could be, as it were, unsaid. And here was this letter, treating them as unspoken and giving her what she wanted. But now this letter seemed to her more awful than anything she could possibly imagine. So in other words, she's not going to be allowed to indulge her love affair with Vronsky, which is a passionate love affair. And that's unspeakable, really, unimaginable. She's got to go on trapped in this loveless marriage with no way out. So we get a lot of inner monologue about that. And she talks of how her husband has basically trapped her through her love for Seryozha, because he knows that she will never leave him. I mean, Seryozha. She will never leave her son. So, if Seryozha is not going to be allowed to go with her, which it seems he's not, she's got no choice but to stay. So she's trapped. And then she says, was there ever a woman as unhappy as I am? It's quite a big line. And then we get a note that says that she values her position in society, which is interesting. So she knows that if this were to come out about her affair, her position in society would be destroyed. She doesn't want that. But at the same time, she wants to go to Vronsky. So she decides she's going to go to Betsy's. So that's where this happens. She's going to go to Betsy's in the hope of seeing Vronsky, but she's forgotten, of course, that they discussed, she and Vronsky, going to Betsy's, and when Anna said that she wasn't going to go, Vronsky said, oh well, if you're not going, I won't go either. So she's forgotten that. Tolstoy tells us that she's forgotten. So she's going to go to Betsy's. As far as we know, Vronsky's not going to be there, so let's see what happens. Okay, chapter 17, you'll see what I mean. So Anna goes to Betsy's, and of course Vronsky's not coming. So she's a bit trapped. She's like, well, I'll stay for a bit and I'll leave as soon as I can. She makes up a lie, which we're told, for whom lying, which was alien to her nature, had become not only simple and natural in society, but even brought her pleasure. And it goes on to explain that she couldn't really explain why she came up with the lie that she did, which is that she's going to have to leave early to go and visit somebody. And it just came out on the spur of the moment, and then we get more in her monologue where she's thinking to herself, well, if I had been going to plan to tell a lie, I couldn't really have come up with anything better. So what's going on here? She's just getting used to being devious. She's taking pleasure from being devious. And then we're told that Betsy, Princess Tverskaya, she knows all about what's going on, but they don't speak of it. And then there's a scene where there's a letter arrives from Vronsky's valet, or is it valet, to say that he's not coming. And of course Princess Tverskaya feels she should reply, so she does. And Anna's with her as she writes the reply, and then she says, I'm just going to nip out for a minute, if you could seal up that reply for me and I'll send it off. In other words, here's an opportunity for you, Anna, my friend, to write a secret note to Vronsky, which she does. She says, come and meet me at, and then she mentions the name of the person that she'd lied about going to visit. So I guess she actually is going to go and visit that person now. Can't remember the name of the person, starts with a W. And Vronsky's to meet her there. So we'll see. And that's really it, that's the chapter. But there's a bit where they're talking of another character, somebody I've not met yet. Lisa Merkalova, or Merkalova, who's the wife of a business enemy of Anna's husband. But she says of Anna that she's a real heroine out of a novel. It's like, nice one, Tolstoy. She is a heroine out of a novel. Of course, we all know that. But Anna doesn't. So I just thought that was cute. Right, what's Anna up to today in chapter 18? So she's at Betsy's, remember, Princess Tverskaya, and two characters come in that we've not met before. So first of all, I wanted to talk about Tolstoy's descriptive writing. When he's describing people, it's just exquisite. I don't know how much to read out actually, because you've got the book, haven't you? You must have, or why are you here? Yeah, so he describes Sappho Stolz. So I won't read it all out, it's beautiful prose, but you can look it up yourself. But I do have one bit that I've made a note of here that stood out to me. It's describing Lisa Merkalova. And it said, she had the sparkle of a diamond of the first water amongst pieces of glass. This sparkle shone out from her exquisite, truly enigmatic eyes. And apologies for that racket, by the way. Scaffolding noises, there's nothing I can do about it, and I still want to record outside because it's just so nice. So I hope it's not interfering with the voiceover. I suspect it is though. Shouty workman. Anyway, so that was in the Rosamund Bartlett translation. I looked it up in Pevear and Volokhonsky, this one here, and it says, there was the brilliance of a diamond of the first water amidst glass. This brilliance shone from her lovely, indeed unfathomable eyes. So enigmatic in one, unfathomable in the other. And it's a callback, because in a previous paragraph we were told that of Lisa Merkalova, everyone said that her eyes were enigmatic. So then we get the narrator confirming that. And same thing with unfathomable, it's repeated. In the Russian, let's see if I can get through this. В ней был блеск настоящей воды, бриллианта среди стекол. Этот блеск светился из ее прелестных, действительно неизъяснимых глаз. Неизъяснимый, unfathomable, enigmatic, comes from изъяснить, which I guess means to explain or to elucidate, and then the nye prefix means not explainable, explicable, inexplicable. Enigmatic, I think, is a nice translation, as is unfathomable. Well done to both translators. And then Anna's talking to Lisa, and Lisa says to her, how do you manage not to be bored? Just looking at you raises one's spirits. You live, but I am bored. So it's interesting that I don't think Lisa knows Anna. We're told that she did want to speak to her at the horse race, but Anna disappeared before she got a chance. So maybe they do know each other. And Lisa seems to admire Anna's spirit. She says, it's enough to look at you and you can see that here is a woman who might be happy or unhappy, but not bored. Tell me, how do you do it? So, yeah, it's a good conversation. Then Anna's like, yeah, I got to go, because remember she'd arranged to meet Vronsky at some woman's house that starts with a W. I've forgotten it again. And the man who's there, whose name I've forgotten, with either Lisa or Sappho, I can't remember who he's with either. 50-year-old guy with pepper grey hair. He's like, no, Anna, you need to stay, we love your company. She's quite taken by that, but she decides, no, it's much more important that I go and meet Vronsky at Mrs. W's house. So we leave her having just gone. At the end of the chapter, she's out the door. Right, what's Vronsky up to? Chapter 19. We get some background about his finances as he sits down at the table to figure out how he's going to repay his debts, and it's a bit boring, but I feel that it's leading somewhere. So Tolstoy says this: every person who knows the full complexity of the circumstances surrounding him down to the last detail will be bound to presume that the complexity of those circumstances and the difficulty of sorting them out happen to be unique to him. And it will not occur to him that others might be surrounded by a similar complexity in their own personal circumstances. So it seemed to Vronsky. So it's a very Tolstoyan paragraph, I think, outlaying man's complexities. But yeah, as I said, he sits down at the table, figures out his debts, he tells us about his income, and it's not a good picture. We also learn how generous a man Vronsky is, because he helps his brother out with some debts and to help him get married and stuff, and he won't renege on it or demand the money back. His honour won't allow that. So he has to come up with a plan, which he does. Decides he's going to sell his horses, take out a loan, pay those who need paying first. The rest can be written off according to his code of rules, which we learn about in the next chapter. And so we'll just get into that, will we, the next chapter. He has a code of rules and values that are unequivocal, such as: one must pay a card sharper, but need not pay a tailor. One must not lie to men, but to women one may. One must never deceive anyone, but a husband one may. That an insult can never be pardoned, but one may insult others, and so on. So, yeah, quite despicable in some ways, wouldn't you say? Now what's happening now is that his affair with Anna has revealed to him that his code of rules doesn't cover everything. There are some circumstances that he's not envisaged, such as his lover falling pregnant. What's he going to do? So we're reminded that at the time when she told him, he was like, well, leave your husband and come with me, we'll go off together. But that was in the heat of the moment. Now he's in this cold calculating phase and he's thinking to himself, that might not be the best idea. And we learn that ambition is a worm that he's secretly been coveting through his life. The worm of ambition. And that if he were to give up his commission in the army and go off with Anna, he'd be jeopardising any chances of rising up through the ranks. And we compare him to Volokhonsky, who's a contemporary of his, a friend of his, someone who trained with him, who's just come back from Central Asia with the rank of general, whereas Volokhonsky's only a captain in the cavalry. So he's got ambitions about coming up through the ranks and becoming an important man. So yeah, it's interesting to get a glimpse into his character. And we're told about the thing with the honour against insulting someone's husband. It says here that the one thing the husband had a right to do, talking of Karenina, was to demand satisfaction with a weapon in his hand, and Volokhonsky had been ready for that from the outset. But of course we know Karenina's not going to do that. That's not his style. So yeah, we're left with Volokhonsky in a bit of a predicament. Just of course as is Anna. Anna's in a much worse predicament, obviously. But Volokhonsky's got some thinking to do, and at this stage, I mean, we know that Volokhonsky loves Anna, but is it a cold, calculating kind of love? Or is his head going to take over from his heart and lead to some decisions that Anna's not going to be happy about? It's intriguing, isn't it? Right, we're going to go through 4 chapters here, from chapter 21 through to 24, part 3. So we're with Volokhonsky to start with in chapter 21. Remember his friend Serpuchovskoy? He has a discussion with him. This is the guy who has outranked him now. And Volokhonsky wants to keep things as they are. He's in love with Anna and he wants to go ahead with giving up his commission so that he can be with Anna. And Serpuchovskoy says, give me carte blanche, resign your commission and I will, what does he say? What does he say? Draw him in imperceptibly. Into what though? I'm not quite sure what that's about. It's about ambition, and Serpuchovskoy seems to think that Volokhonsky should give up this illicit affair and he will bring him in to help him achieve his ambition. Is that it? And he says the only way that women don't get in the way of ambition is through marriage. So obviously Volokhonsky can't marry Anna because she's already married. In other words, give up that affair. And he says, this is Serpuchovskoy, but I'm married, and believe me, getting to know only your wife whom you love, you get to know all women much better than if you knew thousands of them. So yeah, he's pro-marriage, which is great. It's good for him, not good for Anna. And at that point, Anna's note arrives. Remember the one she sent while she was at Betsy's, inviting Volokhonsky to come and meet her at Lady W's house. So Volokhonsky's like, I need to bail. See you later. And then he goes off, chapter 22, in a hired carriage, because we're told people know his carriage, so he doesn't want to gets seen going to meet his illicit affair. And we get a beautiful description here of the passing scenery and of Vronsky's mood. It's very Tolstoyan, and I just loved it. Then we get some inner monologue from Vronsky as he's sitting in the carriage, feeling pretty good about himself. So we've got Anna on the one hand who's feeling wretched, and we've got Vronsky who's feeling the joys of the world. It says here, "I don't want anything at all but this happiness," he thought, as he gazed at the ivory knob of the bell in the space between the windows, and conjured up in his mind a picture of Anna as she was the last time he saw her. "And the more time goes on, the more I love her." So, yeah, he's happy. Anna's not. So they do have a tete-a-tete at this woman's house. Vronsky said he's expecting... No, he doesn't say it, he thinks it. He's expecting Alexei Alexandrovich Karenin to challenge him to a duel. But that isn't going to happen. He then reads Karenin's letter. Anna gives it to him to read. And he once again asks Anna to leave her husband and go away with him. And then Anna leaves. She says, "I've got to go back." And that's what happens. They don't split up. They leave each other, and she goes one way, he goes the other. So then we get into chapter 23, and we're with Alexei Alexandrovich. So first of all, he's at work. And we're told that there's some commission going on, and he's a bit of a sharpshooter at this commission. He knows how to get his own way, and that's what he does. And then we're told that he's forgotten that it's Tuesday and that Anna's coming home. And I was like, how come? You know, if that were me, I'd be in turmoil. And he hasn't even thought of his wife, or at least we're not told that he has. So I just found that, you know, once again, there's a lack of love there on his part. And then he goes home, and she's there, and she's waiting for him to go and see her, and he doesn't. And she waits some more, and still he doesn't. So she goes to see him, just as he's about to go off to work. So he had no intention of going to see her. So they have a conversation, and she says to him, looking at him and not lowering her eyes beneath his gaze, which was fixed on her hair, "I'm a guilty woman, I'm a bad woman, but I am the same as I was, as I told you then, and I have come to tell you that I can't change anything." And before that, when she'd first come in, he was a wee bit ill at ease, a wee bit tongue-tied, at a loss for words, which is very unlike the Karenin we saw when he was at work. So he is a bit flustered. But then when she comes out with this, he gets angry, and that allows him to get hold of his faculties again. And then he's like, right, here's what's going to happen. You're not going to see Vronsky, you're going to stay with me, and if there's any hint of impropriety, there will be consequences. Oh, by the way, I'm not staying for dinner. And then he goes off to work. And that's it. So how's Anna going to take that? Not well, I don't imagine. Next chapter, 24. We're back with Levin again. And he has had a change of heart. Something's going on with Levin. I didn't quite understand it, I'll just say that up front. He's become disgusted with the agricultural work he had been doing and lost all interest in it. Why? He saw clearly now that the agriculture he had been administering was just a bitter and intractable struggle between him and the labourers. Since the time when he went out to do the mowing with the peasants, remember the scene where he was having the best time, really, just getting shirt sleeves rolled up and getting tore into it with a scythe, and you're having lunch with them and all that, so that he can empathise with the peasants. He's... I don't know how to put it, actually. He's a gentleman farmer, and they are peasants, so he doesn't like that difference. Is he kind of against the idea of serfdom? Is that what it is? I think this is very much a Tolstoy idea that's been transplanted into this character. It's all Tolstoy's ideals at this point. So I'm hoping we get into it more, because it's a bit confusing. He says, none of this happened because anyone wished Levin or his farming ill. It simply happened because they wanted their work to be enjoyable and carefree. And his interests were not only alien and incomprehensible to them, but fatally opposed to their own entirely legitimate interests. So, gentleman farmer, he's responsible for all these serfs and for paying them so that they can live. And he needs to make a profit for himself so that he can live and he can pay his bills. But the peasants want an easy life. They want a carefree life. They want their work to be as easy as possible. I mean, who doesn't? So when he tells them to go and mow a field that's difficult to mow, they end up mowing a different field that's easy to mow, and then they blame it on something. And they say, don't worry about it, Constantine, whatever his name is, it'll all be fine. So they're not doing what he's asking of them, and therefore he feels that he shouldn't be asking them. You see, if he's earning money and they're relying on the wages he pays them, if the farm becomes unprofitable, he can't afford to pay them. So by they're not doing the work that's required to keep the farm in profit, they're doing themselves out of jobs. Then he thinks, aye, Kitty, she's living nearby, she's here now, and Dolly is trying to get me to go over there and to ask her once again to propose to her. He says, I can't ask her to be my wife just because she cannot be the wife of the man she wanted. So he's a proud man. And at one point, Dolly asks that Levin send a saddle over, a side saddle, and to bring it himself. So she's clearly trying to get him to go over there. But he doesn't. He sends it without even a note. And he feels shameful at that, but he just doesn't want to face up to it. So he ends up going to visit a friend that he'd promised he would go and visit to go shooting and take his frustration out with a rifle, shooting snipe. So that's where we leave him. And we'll see you in the next one. Right, we're getting near the end of part 3 in Anna Karenina. Let's see what we've got going on. So we're with Levin at the moment, and I'm going to go through chapters 25 to 29, which leaves us with another 3 to finish the part. So Levin, remember, has decided that he can't be with Kitty. The invitation came for him to go, and he's like, nope, can't go and see them. So he's basically running away to a wealthy peasant. He's running away to a landowner's house where he's been invited to go shooting. And on his way there, he stops off to water the horses at a wealthy peasant's farm. And it got me wondering, that's a kulak, isn't it? But that's a Soviet thing. Did that word exist back in, where are we, 1870s? I don't think so. So we'll call him a wealthy peasant farmer. And he sees that the farm is being run in an efficient way. The peasant farmer has got labourers, and they are going about their business in a way that he admires. This is Levin admires. And he's like, how is this happening? Why can my labourers not work that way? You know, he's had a bit of a dark night of the soul with regards to his agricultural work, and he understands that his farm isn't working in a way that gels with his beliefs, but he doesn't know what the answer is to this problem. Here he gets an example of a farm that's running in a way that does vibe with his beliefs and his values. So he's impressed. And then he goes on his way and goes to visit Swijaschki, this landowner guy. And the landowner guy believes that his sister-in-law should marry Levin. So there's a bit of matchmaking going on. The sister-in-law comes out wearing a low-cut top, so we get a lot of chat about her neckline and her ample bosom, and it's quite comical in a way. But Levin's not into it. He's not interested at all. So they're at dinner, she's flirting with him, and he's like, I'm going to go over here and talk to the men. So the men are having a bit of a discussion about politics and farming and economics and stuff like that. They're all landowner types, and he gets involved in the discussion. And I like this quotation here, where it says, Swijaschki was sitting sideways on with his elbow on the table, twirling a cup round with one hand and with the other, continually gathering his beard into his fist, bringing it to his nose as if he was sniffing it and releasing it. I just thought that was a lovely little detail, a good example of Tolstoy's writing that makes it feel real, you know. Right, and we're into chapter 27. There's a political discussion going on about farming methods and about whether emancipation was a good thing or a bad thing. It's kind of a conservatism versus liberalism debate, a universal debate. We're still having them now, and I'm sure we will continue to have these debates for time immemorial, which is a backwards thing, isn't it? Whatever the forwards version of that is. So, I've said, look at the top of page 338 for this discussion. So, yeah, they're talking about farming yields and about efficiency and about how the labourers won't work without authority, without discipline. And I'm looking up the wrong book here. That's for Blomov. That's for my other video. Yeah, he insisted that the Russian peasant was a swine and liked swinishness, and that power was needed to rid him of his swinish ways. But there was none. The stick was what was needed, but we had become so liberal that the 1,000-year-old stick had suddenly been replaced by some kind of lawyers in prisons, where the worthless, putrid peasants were fed on good soup and allotted so many cubic feet of air. So, yeah, it's a very political discussion. How do you get the peasants to work efficiently on your farm, knowing that in so doing they will be bettering their own situations as well? So this discussion continues. In the next chapter, let's finish that chapter off. I like this wee bit here where it says that Swijaschki was impeding Levin in his unpleasant habit of prying beyond the reception rooms of his mind. So, Levin's left with Swijaschki. The other guests go, and he's left with Swijaschki in his office, and they get to discussing it a bit more. And Swijaschki's of the opinion that education is the key. How do you bring the peasants up to be able to produce efficiently? And he thinks the answer's schools. Levin doesn't agree with that. He's like, no, it's an economic problem. It's poverty. They don't have enough leisure time. They don't have enough time for education. So education isn't going to help. And this is kind of, we see this as an example that he's actually right when we get to the next chapter. So at this point, Levin goes off to bed, ponders the discussions that he's had with Swijaschki, and then decides that he's going to leave early the next morning to go back to his farm, change his entire method completely, which he does when he gets back, and he tells the steward, these are my plans. So this is in chapter 29. The steward's like, yeah, good, I told you so. I told you that the system wasn't working. And then he puts it into practice, and it doesn't work. And he gets to pondering why that might be. And the fact is that all of these ideas that have come in from Europe, they work in Europe, but not in Russia, because Russia's not Europe. Russia has a different kind of people, and they have their own ways and means and ideas and philosophies. And you can't impose one system on another. I mean, does that sound familiar? It's like, yeah, we know this. And Tolstoy's grappling with this idea of how to make the situation for the peasants better when they're so reluctant to change, they're so resistant to technologies that improve their working methods. Like it mentions a plough and says that, you know, the peasants can see that the plough's more efficient, but they've always got reasons why they're not using it, and they've gone back to their old ways. So it's just super interesting, and it reminds me of a character from a history book I read by Orlando Figes called A People's Tragedy, which is a history of Russia from before the Soviet time right through into that period. And it's fascinating. There's a character in that book who is a landowner type, and it talks of the elders, the village elders, and this guy wants to bring modern farming methods into Russia, and he meets resistance, and he ends up being ejected from the village. And this is a true story. I'm going to look that up again and make notes on that character, because he stayed in my head. I can't remember his name, but it was a fascinating part of the history, and the way that Figes was able to bring the history to life by bringing these real characters into it. So I'm going to read that some more, and I'll maybe do a video about that character, because it fascinates me, and it's got me thinking maybe there's an idea there for, if not a full historical novel, there might be at least a character there that I could bring into a historical novel. So I've got an idea in my head that I would love to do that kind of thing, to write a historical novel based in Russian times. Possibly Praskovya, Sheremetьev's serf, the one who he married. And anyway, you don't need to hear about all that now. That's just what's going on in my head. And it's fascinating to me that Tolstoy's got me thinking of the real history and how I'm making these connections between these different books that I've read. I just love that. I do. So that's us up to part 3, chapter 29. We're nearly at the end. Hope you're enjoying it. I'll see you in the next one. So, chapter 30. The farming system was working splendidly in practice. Was it now? Did we not talk yesterday about how it wasn't? Well, it is now. And Levin now wants to write his book to put all the theory down, and it says, completely destroy it, talking of political economy, as a discipline, and lay the foundation of a new discipline. So he's in research mode. And Agafya Mikhailovna, his housekeeper, says to him, it doesn't matter what you do. As if he's an idler, he'll always be slipshod. If he has a conscience, he'll work. But if not, there's nothing you can do. So she's talking about the labourers who work on the farm. You can't change them. There's nothing you can do. Then there's a knock at the door. It's his brother Nikolai. Nikolai's not well. He's come round to stay for a bit. And Levin's like, aye, okay. You don't look well, brother. And he wishes, or the narrator says, that it would be good if these two brothers were able to talk to each other with love and affection and openness and honesty, but they can't. So they end up talking about political systems, and Nikolai's hearing from Konstantin about his farming plans, and he's like, no, that's communism. Nikolai's like, no, it isn't. So they start bickering, and he ends up basically kicking him out. He says, look, you can't stay, Nikolai. And it's causing Konstantin to think about mortality. He's thinking about his own mortality. And he says, I'm working, I want to achieve something, but I forgot that it will all end. That there is death. So it gets quite dark, but he still feels the need to achieve his goals before he dies. I mean, he's only, 30? He's not just about to die. But seeing his brother, who probably is just about to die, that's got him thinking this way. So Nikolai leaves. Konstantin decides to go abroad because he wants to go and research his farming methods, the theory and stuff. And it says, in a very dark scene, Levin said what he had been genuinely thinking of late. He saw nothing but death or its approach in everything. But the work he had started absorbed him even more as a result. He had to get through life somehow until death arrived. Darkness smothered everything for him. But precisely because of this darkness, he felt that the only guiding thread in the darkness was his work, and he grasped it and held on to it with all his might. He had to get through life somehow until death arrived. Well, I mean, isn't that the case for all of us? But I get a feeling here that he's feeling lovelorn. He's feeling bad that he's not got a wife. I remember Swijaschski, whom he went to visit a few chapters ago. His sister-in-law was making eyes at him, so, I mean, he could have settled, but he's not a settler. He loves Kitty, but he's decided he's not going to go to Kitty after what happened when she rejected his proposal. So he's feeling lovelorn, and he's going to lose himself in his work. That's how he's going to get through his life. And that's what this seeking is all about, this book that he wants to write. He wants to change farming throughout the whole country to leave a legacy, I suppose. So that's us at the end of part 3 of Anna Karenina. We're about 40% of the way through the book. The next section that Henry Eliot has got for us, I think, is about half of part 4. So in case you've forgotten, I'm reading this along with Henry Eliot, and tomorrow is the deadline for finishing part 3, which I've managed to do. Yay! And so I'm looking forward to seeing what Henry has to say tomorrow when his video drops. And then, yeah, I'm really enjoying the novel. I'm enjoying it a lot. So, yeah, I hope this is interesting and useful to you. If you're reading it, perhaps you're reading it way off in the future. These videos are evergreen, so of course that's possible. I watched Katie Lumsden's Bleak House videos this year. When did she put them out? I don't even know. A long time ago anyway. So they were just as relevant now as they were then. That's the beauty of these kind of vloggy videos. You know, doesn't matter when you watch them. These books are going to be around for a long, long time. So, let me know if you enjoy this kind of thing. Is it worthwhile for you? Is it helping you to get through the novel? It's helping me, and that's kind of why I'm doing it, because it means I'm reading more closely. Taking notes, which is fun, because I love stationery and I love fountain pens and all of that. So, yeah, it's good fun, and I'm enjoying it. And I hope you are too. Thanks for watching. See you later.